AWS Identity and Access Management Role. IAM Role. An IAM role is an IAM identity that you can create in your account that has specific permissions. It is similar to an IAM user, with permission policies that determine what the role can and cannot do in AWS. However, instead of being uniquely associated with one person, a role is intended to be assumable by anyone who needs it. Also, a role does not have standard long-term credentials, such as a password or access keys associated with it. Instead, when a user assumes a role, it provides the user with temporary security credentials for the role session. Use cases for IAM roles. IAM roles can be used for access delegation and identity federation. Use of IAM roles for access delegation. You can use roles to delegate access to users within your account, users from another account, external vendors from another account, AWS services such as EC2, Lambda or ECS, to access other AWS resources. Use of IAM roles for identity federation. IAM role can be used to federate users from other identity stores to access resources in your account. These identity stores are corporate identities, such as Active Directory or LDAP, social identities such as Amazon, Google, Facebook, etc. IAM Role Delegation. Example scenario for IAM Role Access Delegation. An organization wants a developer from development account to access an S3 bucket from production account. Let's look at the steps for this scenario. Step 1. An admin from production account creates an IAM role in production account. Let's name this role as Update App. As a part of the role creation, the admin establishes trust relationship with the development account and grants permission to the role to access S3 bucket in production account. Let's name this bucket as Production App. Step 2. Admin from the development account permits the developer from the development account to assume the role. Step 3. The developer requests to assume the Update App role by making Assume Role API call. Step 4. AWS STS verifies the request with the role's trust policy to ensure the request is from trusted entity, that is, an IAM user from development account. After verification, AWS STS returns temporary security credentials to access Production App S3 bucket. Step 5. AWS uses these temporary credentials on behalf of the developer for all actions on Production App S3 bucket. IAM Role Identity Federation. In the previous section, we explain how IAM role can be used to delegate access to users in other AWS accounts. In this section, we look at use of IAM role to federate users in other identity stores to access resources in your account. These identity stores are corporate identities, such as Active Directory or LDAP, social identities such as Amazon, Google, Facebook, etc. IAM Role Identity Federation. Scenario 1. Corporate users in your organization want to use their existing identities so as to get single sign-on access to AWS. Let's look at the steps for this scenario. Step 1. A user in your organization uses a client app to request authentication from your organization's identity provider. Step 2. The identity provider authenticates the user against your organization's identity store. It could be an Active Directory or LDAP. Step 3. After successful authentication, the identity provider constructs a SAML assertion with information about the user and sends the assertion to the client app. Step 4. The client app calls the AWS STS assume role with SAML API, passing the ARN of the SAML provider, the ARN of the role to assume, and the SAML assertion from the identity provider. Step 5. The API response to the client app includes temporary security credentials. Step 6. The client app uses the temporary security credentials to access S3 bucket. IAM Role Web Identity Federation. Scenario 2. Web Identity Federation. Customers or users of your web app can sign in using social identities to access resources in your AWS account. Let's look at the steps for this scenario. Step 1. A customer starts your web app on a mobile device. The app asks the user to sign in. Step 2. The app redirects to social identity provider for authentication. Once authenticated, the app receives an ID token. Step 3. The app exchanges the ID token for a cognito token. Step 4. The app exchanges the cognito token with AWS STS for temporary security credentials. Step 5. The app then uses these temporary security credentials to access AWS resources. The IAM role associated with the temporary security credentials and its assigned policies determines what can be accessed. Roles are a set of permissions granted to a trusted entity. Trusted entity could be a user within your own account or from another account. Trusted entity could be federated from corporate identities store or social identities to access resources in your AWS account. With roles, there is no sharing of long-term credentials and hence it is secure. Further, one can revoke access anytime, thus ensuring better control. Thank you.